You know whose stock holdings are not doing so well, though, right now?
Who is it?
Donald Trump.
Oh, that's right. Good.
We're going to talk about that in a minute, but first let's start with he was in court yesterday. So the first of his criminal trials to actually begin is the quote-unquote hush money one, having to do with payments to Stormy Daniels to try to keep quiet an affair that he allegedly had with her previously. You remember the Catch and Kill, National Enquirer, all of this stuff from the past. That's what this one has to do with. He was in court yesterday. After the session, he came out and had some things to say about how this all went down. Let's take a listen.
Thank you very much. We had some amazing things happen today. As you know, my son has graduated from high school, and it looks like the judge will not let me go to the graduation of my son, who's worked very, very hard. He's a great student. He's very proud of the fact that he did so well. I was looking forward for years to have graduation with his mother and father there, and it looks like the judge isn't going to allow me to escape this scam. It's a scam trial. In addition, as you know, next Thursday, we're before the United States Supreme Court on a very big hearing on immunity. And this is something that we've been waiting for a long time. And the judge, of course, is not going to allow us. He's a very conflicted judge. And he's not going to allow us to go to that. He won't allow me to leave here for a half a day, go to D.C. and go before the United States Supreme Court because he thinks he's superior, I guess, to the Supreme Court. So I just want to thank you very much, but that I can't go to my son's graduation or that I can't go to the United States Supreme Court, that I'm not in Georgia or Florida or North Carolina campaigning like I should be. It's perfect for the radical left Democrats. That's exactly what they want. This is about election interference. That's all it's about. Thank you very much.
So as with many Trump statements, not entirely true, but does contain a grain of truth. Let's put this up on the screen. So he specifically with regards to Barron's graduation, the judge said, we'll see, was not ruled out. However, he is supposed to be in the courtroom every day, 4 days a week for the duration of the criminal trial. The judge said if you don't show up, there will be an arrest. This trial, slated to last somewhere around 8 weeks. Obviously, campaign season is heating up. Joe Biden is surprisingly actually going out and doing some rallies and campaigning to try to show a contrast with
He's going to be in Pennsylvania all week.
Out in Pennsylvania and speaking to voters while Trump is, trapped in a courtroom litigating all of these things. We're in the phase of this is obviously the very early phases where you're dealing with jury selection and some sort of like pre-trial decisions about what type of evidence is going to be allowed. So, for example, they're going to allow in information about the Access Hollywood tape, but my understanding is they're not going to actually be able to play the tape. So those are the sorts of things that are being decided with regard to the jurors. There are apparently dozens of them, basically half of the first jury pool that were like, I can't be impartial in this case. Like, what are you talking about here? I already have very strong feelings about this man and the things that he's done, which, who can blame them? The idea of being able to find a jury pool that doesn't have some sort of preconceived notions about Trump, very difficult. But I will say, the jury of our peers has done a good job of trying to put their own biases aside and evaluate the evidence in front of them. But the details here from Axios, they said over 24 of the jurors who said they can't be impartial in the case were white women, 1 Hispanic woman, 4 women of Asian descent, 14 were white men, 1 man of Asian descent, 6 other jurors were of unknown gender and racial descent. So anyway, that gives you a sense of some of the machinations that are going on right now. Saagar.
Yeah, I mean, I do think it is absolutely nuts that he is going to be arrested if he's not allowed in the courtroom, because that is, I mean, as a campaign blow, that is huge, gigantic. And it's just, this is the most political of all of the trials, in my opinion, just because it's such a dumb criminal charge. It's an extraordinary interpretation of the law. It's still open question of whether he'll stand if there is some sort of a conviction. In terms of the politics and all of that, it is the least relevant, I think, to any of the things that people are concerned about Trump. And then it is going to keep him off of the campaign trail. As I was reading, Krystal, they didn't even choose any jury people yesterday. Not one juror was selected. Look, I don't know a lot about juries and how all this stuff works, but given how the amount of there's all this bickering over what can be introduced and what can't be introduced, that he has to be present for all of that. I'm not again, not an expert on New York criminal law. I had seen that they don't necessarily have to be present for at least all of it or some of it or whatever. It's, as you said, it's completely up to the judge. But I do think, just politically, I think it looks absolutely terrible to keep him chained into a courtroom for 4 to 5 days a week whenever his opponent is out there actively campaigning. I mean, right now, today, he's headed to Pennsylvania. He's literally going to be there all week. He's going to be holding rallies. Trump just got off the campaign trail as well. So it is a huge blow to him. A question, too, is that's the other thing I wanted to comment on about half the jury pool said they couldn't be impartial. The other half are just lying because there's, how can you possibly be? I wouldn't be able to be impartial. I've met the man before. I'd be like, look, I have my own personal bias. It's different if you're coming up on somebody that you know nothing about and you could probably, weigh evidence and all of that. But how can you possibly go into this and say I could be completely impartial when judging this, either pro or against? I don't think it's possible with the former president.
Your best bet would be to find jurors who hate both Biden and Trump.
Yeah, that's true.
That would be your.
That's a good point.
That would be your best bet. I mean, listen, I think people are capable of, to some extent, putting aside their political preferences to look at just the facts of this particular case. But, putting that aside and the challenges of finding an impartial jury, there was another thing that caught a lot of people's attention, given especially all the conversation about Joe Biden, his age and his senility, which I think is all very much quite merited and warranted. Apparently, Trump was having trouble staying awake during some of the proceedings yesterday. Let's take a listen to Maggie Haberman commenting on that.
I have to ask, you guys have been, at the Times, have been live blogging this event. And 40 minutes ago, you wrote an observation that I was very surprised. Trump appears to be sleeping. His head keeps dropping down and his mouth goes slack. Tell us about that.
Well, Jake, he appeared to be asleep, and repeatedly his head would fall down. There have been other moments in other trials, like the Agent Carroll trial, which was around the corner in January, where he appeared very still and seemed as if he might be sleeping, but then he would move. This time, he didn't pay attention to a note that his lawyer, Todd Blanche, passed him. His jaw kept falling on his chest, and his mouth kept going slack. Now, sometimes people do fall asleep during court proceedings, but it's notable given the intensity of this morning and a lot of what was being argued.
Yeah, that's rather surprising.
I mean,
fell asleep.
Of course, you can imagine what they would make of this if it was Biden. I will say, listen, I don't
even blame him. I'd probably fall asleep too. I'd be bored.
Maybe, but I don't know. I feel like if I was in a criminal trial, I'd feel pretty amped up about that. I'd probably be wanting to pay pretty close attention to what was going on, even though I was notorious in back in school days. I couldn't stay awake, especially if they put up a projector when I was over. I can
when
relate
they lower
to
the lights,
it.
You're done.
In one sense, on the other hand, it was pretty extraordinary. First day of your criminal trial, and you're there dozing off, can't keep it together. So we'll probably see more of that. Apparently, at other times, he was very animated in terms of his facial expressions, as Trump certainly can be. Maggie Haberman and some of her other colleagues at the New York Times, she, of course, very well sourced, had a report on the way that he hopes to spin this trial. Let's put this up on the screen. So the headline here in the 2024 race, Trump's trial is about to take center stage. The race for president will shift much of its focus to a Manhattan courtroom. This looks like no other presidential campaign in the history of the country, one Republican pollster said. That is undeniably true. And basically, he is telling his advisors that he wants as much media coverage as he can possibly get, centered around his court appearances. You see him speaking to the cameras afterwards. I'm sure we're going to get much more of that. He wants his supporters defending him on TV. He wants all of the pro-Trump media ecosystem. Many of them have actually gone to Manhattan to be part of this whole scene. He is really counting on all of that and hoping that independents have a similar reaction to his legal trouble as his own base has. I mean, it's undeniable that his legal problems, at the very least, didn't hurt him with a Republican base, and I think pretty clearly helped him with a Republican base. As we predicted, Saagar, that it would help him sort of coalesce support, get everyone lockstep around him. Any idea of, hey, maybe I'm flirting with Ron DeSantis, maybe I'm flirting with Nikki Haley or whoever else, that was sort of quashed, and it was, all right, we got to be with our guy. I think it's much less likely that the rest of the electorate is going to have the same response. And even with regard to this case, I completely understand, and we've talked about this before, that it is the least serious of the charges. You know, a lot of polling suggests that Americans find this to be the least consequential of the charges, but it's not like it's not without its own tawdry details. And the danger for Trump is that some of this stuff has faded from memory. And you made a comment, Saagar, about how this isn't part of the core of like what people don't like about Trump. I'm not sure I agree with that, because part of the negative Trump factor is like the chaos, the insanity, right? This sort of, I mean, the details here are gross. He had an affair with a porn star, and then he tried to hide it, not only from his wife, but from the entire country. You know, used these payments and manipulated, like lied about what the payments were for to get the story killed before Election Day. It's not like that's a nothing story. In the context of all the other stuff that he did, it's a nothing story. But in the grand scheme of like political scandals, it is actually pretty significant. And at the time, when voters were first learning about it, they actually found it to be quite significant. So the danger for him is that people are reminded like, oh yeah, this actually was really gross. And this actually is one of the reasons why I don't really like this man, and I don't think he should be in the Oval Office again.
Look, it's possible. The only reason I say it is I think it's just so baked in with Trump. It's like when people were going after him, like, he didn't pay his taxes. I'm like, you're telling me a man who filed for bankruptcy and was notorious for stiffing his contractors didn't pay his taxes? Wow, I'm shocked. You're telling me the person who has created a tabloid sex star image of himself had an affair with a porn star? Who would have guessed it? It's not like he flaunted it all over television and rode it to fame. At a certain point, I just think it's baked into his image. I don't think people particularly care. Again, I could be wrong. At this point, though, I mean, look, we do have some electoral evidence. Let's not just think about polls. Let's think about the elections. At the height of the Stormy Daniels mania, 2018, 2019, that's when Republican Party identification was sky high, right before COVID. When, though, did Trump really suffer? 2018, really around the issue of health care. In 2020, he suffers because of COVID. And in 2022, he suffers from Stop the Steal and general chaos. So I think abortion, Stop the Steal, and 2018, we're talking about healthcare and the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. In general, those four have an electoral track record of being pretty successful in terms of mounting an attack on Trump.
Yeah.
This one, I don't see electoral evidence that it particularly matters.
I think that's fair.
Yeah.
Let's put this up on the screen from the Washington Post just to give you a sense of what I was just referring to. Like when this first was breaking, you can see kind of like a little bit below halfway down this list, December 2018, hush money. They asked, okay, what do you think about this? Do you think what he did is illegal? Do you think it's not illegal but unethical? Or do you think that there's nothing wrong with it? And actually, of all of these various Trump scandals, from Russiagate to the tax issue that you just referred to the Ukraine perfect phone call, to the 2020 election efforts and the Mar-a-Lago docs, this was the one where the smallest percentage of people actually said there was nothing wrong here. Because in a certain sense, the facts of it are very difficult to actually outright defend. Like with Russiagate, there was clearly a defense there. You know, even with the election efforts, he has spun some sort of a defense to make it kind of ambiguous. No, I'm just exercising my free speech. With the documents, he's made these claims about, you know, presidential immunity, et cetera, et cetera. So you actually have a little bit more ground to stand on. Whereas with this, people may not find it as serious as those allegations, but it's kind of hard to just defend on the merits, like paying off this gross publication and paying off this porn star to hide this affair that had happened. So that's why I'm not totally convinced. I also just think there is something to the normie reaction of seeing someone in a courtroom on trial. You know, we heard it from our own focus group respondents in the Republican focus group when they were asked, okay, if he is actually indicted of anything, if he's actually found guilty of any of these things that he's been indicted for, are you still with him? And they were like, I just can't. I just can't. So I don't think that this situation is without risk for him. And I certainly don't buy his analysis that he can actually turn this to his benefit. I just don't see it. Now, listen, I've been wrong about many things in the past, and he is an extraordinary political actor and gets away with things and pulls things off and turns things to his advantage that no other politician really could. But I think having to spend 8 weeks in a Manhattan courtroom talking about cover-ups and porn stars and extramarital affairs and what's being, billed as election interference from back in 2016, it's not a good set of facts for him.
No, I don't think it's good, and I think it could be. This is the thing with Trump. There could be several compounding courtrooms, all of this that stacks up, and it creates an image of somebody who is, against the law, the normie reaction of seeing him convicted. Very, very possible. Also, just not forget this. It's death by 1,000 cuts to a certain extent. We've got all the money that he's got to spend on his legal bills. He's got all of his attention. Now he's off of the campaign trail. He can never really argue the counterfactual of what it would look like if he wasn't burdened by all of these things. And it's just the first of several. I'm not saying it won't hurt him at all. I'm saying this particular one, in the bigger one, I don't think it will be as consequential nearly as, let's say, the January 6th trial. But here's the thing. Who knows if those are ever actually coming to trial?
Right.
That's the best part.
Well, the other thing that I would say politically is, the Biden people, which you can tell from the fact that he's not laying out an affirmative agenda for anything, they really want this to be a referendum on Trump chaos, on Trump extremism, on abortion, on what America would look like under a second Trump term. And so the more that Trump is the center of news and in a very unflattering light and reminding people of some of the things they really didn't like about him last time around, where, since he's been kicked off of Twitter, he's been a little bit in the background. Some of those memories have faded. Some of his term is being viewed through a bit of rose-colored glasses. It definitely benefits the Biden camp to have this be the center of news and it be about, Donald Trump and his various travails. So I think for them, they have to feel like, this pushes the campaign in the direction that they ultimately want it to go. How much of an impact it will have when weighed against, the very serious issues Joe Biden has as well in terms of the polls, I think is another question altogether. Hey guys, if you like that video, go to breakingpoints.com, become a premium subscriber and help us build the best independent media organization on the planet.
That's right. We're subscriber funded. We're building something new. We want to replace these failing mainstream media organizations.
So again, to subscribe, it's breakingpoints.com.